back to Cowabunga Corner. In this episode, we are talking with Bobby, who is the chief editor of the most fantastic comic book on the shelves right now, the new Ninja Turtle comics. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the IDW storyline, which he's been with from the beginning, but now they started the Nickelodeon storyline, and you're involved in that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
I have to thank you from all the fans I've talked to who read the comics on keeping everything in order as much as you do with all the little side storylines that are thrown into this series.
Well, the thanks goes to the fans. I mean, it's been a huge success, and it's all because of you guys, so thank you.
It's also you guys.
It's a good symbiotic relationship.
Oh, yes. Now, what got you into writing and editing? How did you get into the comic book industry?
You know, I've always been a bit of a comic book nerd. I read comics since I was about 8 or 9. I went to NYU Film School and I started writing in high school, and just, you know, I want to tell stories. I learned in film school that film is very expensive, as I'm sure you know with your interviews. You know, to get anything actually completed takes a lot of compromise, takes a long time, and I'm impatient. I wanted to get my stuff out there, and so I finished film school, and I realized, you know, I've always loved comics. Why don't I try and get into that and have something that I can tangibly hold at the end of the day, and be involved in storytelling on a much more immediate, quicker level. And so from there, I just sort of started pursuing a career in comics. That's kind of how it started.
That's awesome. That's where you wanted to go from the get-go with that.
Yeah.
Did you know any other comic artists or editors who inspired you?
I got my job here at IDW through a guy named Andy Schmidt, who was used to be an editor here, but was an editor at Marvel. I got to know him in New York City, where we both lived, and when he came out here, I talked to him a little bit, saying, "Hey, do you have any, you know, suggestions about how to get into this industry?" And he said, "Well, we've got an internship available here if you're interested." And you know, I was in New York at the time, and I was like, "Do I want to go all the way across country?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? Let's do it." And so I just kind of worked my way up the ladder.
With Ninja Turtles, were you a fan of the Ninja Turtles?
Yeah, definitely. I'm 32, so you know, I grew up right in that perfect spot for the first wave of Turtles mania. Loved the cartoons, loved the toys. Then as I got a little bit older and outgrew the show and the cartoon, that's when I really started reading comics a lot. And so I started actually getting into the Mirage books then, and started reading the first issues, and read a little bit of Archie at the same time. So you know, from age 8 until 14, I was really into Turtles, and then, you know, kind of got away from it as I got into college. Didn't really watch the 2003 series, but then when I found out, you know, when IDW was talking about the license, you know, just all those characters came back to me, and both from Mirage and from the original cartoon, and you know, I really jumped at the opportunity to work on it.
It's always good to have a fan behind the series.
Yeah.
That actually has the heart there, and that's one thing we see clearly, especially talking with Tom last year, that you guys are fans as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you have favorite characters that really stand out to you?
That's one of the really great things about Turtles, is that there's so many great characters. I mean, all 4 of the Turtles are great. Casey and April are great. I'm just gonna say everyone's great, and then so many of the villains are great too. You know, do I have a favorite? You know, I don't really. I really like everyone. There isn't a character that I don't like spending time with and getting inside their head. It's such a great balance of personalities. I mean, it's you get something like Batman, and I love Batman, but it's a lot of heavy stuff. It's a lot of dark characters. But Turtles, you get a great mix of style, of tone. You can get really serious, but you can have a lot of fun with it too. So, and that's, you know, everyone kind of thinks that, you know, the Mirage was dark and gritty and the cartoons was just fun and lighthearted. But you look back, and there was a lot of humor in those original issues of Mirage.
Oh yeah.
And there was some, you know, I mean, in hindsight, maybe not, there wasn't too much dark stuff in the cartoon, but when of that age, you're like, oh wow, the Technodrome, that's scary. So, you know, I think it's always had a great mix, and it's great to see, you know, that's what we're trying to do, and it's great to see the Nickelodeon cartoon do that as well. I have some, I remember watching The Gauntlet, the first episode between Shredder and the Turtles. I'm like, wow, that's really heavy and dark, and it was just, my jaw was on the floor. It was such a great fight, and they've been doing a great job, and we're trying our hardest. So it's an exciting time to be a Turtle fan.
With that episode, I love how they have the images to where you can snap them and match them up to the first issue of Mirage.
Sure.
Yeah. Zero and the crew over at Nickelodeon's doing spectacular as well.
We tried to do that in issue 12 with just one shot with when Leo was slashing Shredder across the chest. We kind of had a match shot there, but they did a much better job of doing that. So it was cool. And that episode, just that one episode, it gets so heavy at the end, but it has some of the funniest moments in the entire series too, with the smoke bombs.
I love the bombs.
And Pigeon Pete.
With getting into the Turtle comics, how did it come about that you became the editor?
The first 4 issues, I was the associate editor, which means the first full editor was Scott Dunbier, and I think that was pretty much a product of it being. I was still relatively new at IDW at the time, and it was obviously going to be an important book for us, and they didn't want to just hand it over to the new guy. And Scott's an amazing guy. He's edited some fantastic books, and he's a real legendary editor in his own right. But I think it's safe to say that he doesn't have any particular strong passion for Turtles. And he liked the property fine, but he wasn't as familiar with the characters as Tom and I. And I think once I proved that I could sort of handle all the heavy lifting of editing the book, it kind of made sense, and he has a full work plate anyway. So I helped in those first 4 issues pretty intensively, and then from there, it kind of made sense for me to take on the book full time. I've
been very happy, and I always hear that you got to thank Bobby for everything staying in order, because you guys do have a lot of little side things
Sure.
where you're going, what's going to happen with Casey's dad? What's going on with this group? Are they just going to forget about this? And as Tom pointed out, no, we're not.
Right.
And it always comes back to all the work that you put in as the editor. So.
Well, it's a lot of fun. It's I've got other books that I edit, and I enjoy all my books, but the Turtles is definitely the one that's closest and dearest to my heart. So it's something I there's books that you stay up at night thinking about because of deadlines, and then there's books that you stay up at night thinking about just because it's fun to, and Turtles is that book. So.
Now, did you have to go back and do any research on properties of the Turtles you were not as familiar with, like the 4Kids series, to see where you wanted to go with this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to be fully versed, I hadn't watched any of the 4Kids series, so I watched that. I haven't watched all of it, but I watched the first 3 seasons and got a pretty good grasp of what they're doing. I hadn't read any of the Turtles books past the Mirage books past Volume 2. So I read all the Image series, and I read Volume 4, and there's still a couple issues here and there of Tales, because that was a long run that I haven't got to, but I've covered most of it, so that was a fun in the first year, kind of catching up on that and seeing what had been done since my youth.
Yeah, they kept changing and doing different things through the years, which is what really kept the fans on board. If they kept repeating, we probably would not be here still.
Sure, and that was a large part of our thinking too when we launched the series. We wanted to definitely pay homage to what had come before us, and there's some classic Turtle stuff that you want to get to, and we wanted to do Mousers, wanted to introduce a lot of the supporting characters, but it was also important that we made it our own too, and put our own spin on it. And I think the biggest spin would be the reincarnation angle. But I like to think we've done different things too with some of the dynamics and the characters.
I've never said that I've liked a origin story more than the original on any of the characters before, but with Fugitoid, I have to say you guys won me completely over.
Cool. That was one of those things that was a late night thought that because we didn't plan for Chet to be Fugitoid at the very beginning of the series. He was just the background guy. Like kind of a henchman type character, and that's one of those things just late at night where it pops in your head and you're like, oh wow, okay, does that work? It can't work. It does work. Let's do it. And so that was cool.
How was your initial reaction when the idea of reincarnation came to you?
That's Tom and I bat a lot of ideas back and forth, but that was and I think a lot of our stuff, what we're doing is an idea phase. All the writing is Tom, but an idea phase, that's a lot of combination between the two of us. But that's something that was all Tom. It was just, he had this vision for it, and I think it's been a defining aspect. And, at first, I think like everyone, I was sort of like, wow, that's a big change. I don't know about that. Then you think about it, and it adds a level of history, and it makes it really personal between Shredder and the Foot and Hamato Yoshi and his sons, and his literal sons in our version. And it allowed a lot of narrative opportunities. And when we got thinking about it, we got more and more excited about it. And that's the type of thing that you can't stop thinking about. That's a good sign that you're onto an idea that's we think is good. I know there's a few people that maybe don't. At any change, there's going to be people who are really into it and people who aren't. And that's fine. We knew that going into it. But we were excited about what it opened, the story ideas that it opened, and the way that it enabled our series to be its own, stand on its own 2 feet. So yeah, it didn't take long to really get on board with it, and I think that issue 5 where we introduced the concept is still one of my favorite that Tom's written. I think it was really well done, and getting to work with Mateus for the first time in that issue, you can see the seeds of a lot of things that are going to happen over the next few years in that issue. So
another thing I'm really enjoying with the series is that you guys have been bringing in bits and bits of other people who worked on the Mirage Turtle stuff, like Kevin Eastman being as a co-writer, and then we see Michael Dooney doing some of the artwork for covers on the graphic novels. Do you have any favorite artists who have not touched the new series yet? That's
a really hard question. Dooney's one of my favorites, and I would love to work with him on the new series. And I hope in a year's time we can talk again, and I'll be able to talk about some new stuff, because we've got some fun stuff planned for 2014 that I can't really talk about yet. I don't really have a favorite, because I think if you look in the IDW series, there's a large range of artistic talent and different styles, and I really respond to a lot of different art styles, and Turtles is something you can do something that's super dark and gritty, and then you can do something that's a little more cartoony. So I really respond, and this is a very interesting answer, but there isn't much turtle art in the Mirages that I don't care for. I really like a lot of it.
Mirage
there's a lot of different styles.
Also have that thing with different styles being shown in their comics, all the guest artists, all the different writers coming in and working on it. That's one thing we are seeing still with IDW, bringing in the different artists, especially the micro series, watching different artists come in all the time. I'm on the edge of my seat to see what new style you guys are bringing.
It's really hard to do one-shots, because with an ongoing series and a set creative team, you can kind of let them run for a little. From an editorial point of view, you can be like, okay, you guys know what you're going to do. This is what's going to happen in the next 4 months. Go for it. But with different creative team every month, it's difficult to organize and make sure everyone's on the same page about what's going on in the big picture. But to me, it's really worth it, because I love working with different talent and seeing those different art styles. So I pull out my hair a little bit, but it's always worth it when you see the end product, I think. You look at, and what's been really fun about City Fall is finding little places to drop in different artists, like Mike Henderson had that little page with Casey's dream sequence with his mom. In 26, you're going to see C.P. Wilson, who did the Splinter Micro. He has a little one page. I'm forgetting someone else who's helped out. Well, of course, in issue 23, we got to see everyone, so it was a ton of fun, but terrible to organize, but a lot of fun. I was just personally because I love all those guys. I'm on great terms with all of them. I'm really lucky that, because sometimes just, people don't hit deadlines and relationships get sour, or, it just kind of happens in any sort of creative relationship. But all the Turtle artists, I get along great with all of them, and I think that's largely because everyone's really psyched to be working on Turtles, and everyone's bringing their A game to it. And so that means that no one's, sitting around missing deadlines, and, that I don't get mad at them. So we're a big happy family, which is... which is nice.
With issue 23, bringing in all the different artists, whose idea was that?
I think, Tom, we wanted to do this brainwashing sequence where Leonardo's what I call emotional memories being rewritten. And so we had an idea to sort of to do that, and we knew that we could get kind of trippy with the visuals. But I think it was mostly just a product of we didn't have the lead time on City Fall that we would have liked to. Between Secret History of the Foot Clan and City Fall, Mateus actually had to do another short project in between. So normally you like to get a lot of lead time, especially on something that's 7 issues long, and as you go further and further, you're going to get closer and closer to deadline. So that was a way for us to get a little bit of that lead time back. I don't remember if it was directly my idea, but I know I was definitely pushing for an opportunity to give Mateus a little bit of opportunity to get ahead. So if he's only doing half of an issue in 23, he's able to start working in 24 faster, which helps us with deadlines. And so then from there, I think it just made sense that to break it up in a way that let's see everyone we've had do notable stories. So we had Dan Duncan, Andy Kuhn, Ben Bates, who were the 3 people on the ongoing, and then it made a lot of sense to have Ross. One, he's awesome, and 2, it's Leonardo, and he did the Leonardo micro, so that's obviously an important part for him. And of course, Kevin is Kevin, and it worked out perfectly that he just done issue 21 2 issues before, so it's just one of those things that just kind of worked out. It was only 2 pages, so a lot of those guys, Ben had another project at the time, but everyone can do 2 pages. That's a couple days worth of work. So everyone was able to fit it in, and it worked out really well.
It was well written, well designed overall.
I have to give a shout out to Rhonda too on colors. She did a great job tying it all together and making it cohesive. Which, with that many different styles, I mean, you look at this difference between Andy Kuhn and Ben Bates. It's a big art style change, but it all feels cohesive. And a lot of that's Rhonda. So
with the series, it is obviously a lot of different storylines to keep track of what's going on with every character, from Slash and Old Hob to the Turtles and Shredder, Krang, Stockman. How do you personally go about keeping this all in order so you don't miss a storyline or skip?
That's tricky, and making it still be accessible. That is something I'm curious to hear from fans or people trying to get into the series if the series is accessible at this current time, because we've got all the micro series which are pretty tied into the ongoing. I worry about it being. I think we started off City Fall in a pretty accessible point, but I worry that it gets too big. But this is a big storyline we're doing. I think it's okay for 7 months to get into something kind of deep and intricate with a lot of supporting characters, and we'll have a more pared down cast in the next story arc. But keeping track of it, it's not. What the hard part is managing the micros with the ongoing and making sure everything lines up in that way. Making sure the Cry micro that she's in a mental space that makes sense in between issues 24 and 25. And there's things that don't work out perfectly. I don't know that the Alopex micro works out perfectly chronologically exactly where it is. Is Shredder going to take a day trip to Alaska with Alopex in the middle of after he's just brainwashed Leonardo? I don't know. So maybe that issue takes place a little bit beforehand. So just know it doesn't always work out perfectly, but I try to do everything I can to make sure that it works out in a way that makes sense. It's a lot of shuffling, handing documents to the writers saying, hey, this is our master proposal. The micro-series writers, this is our master proposal. Your issue's going to come in between this and this. This is where the character's sort of mental state is. What makes it a lot easier is that Tom works here at IDW, and you saw where we sit.
Yeah.
We sit literally 3 feet away from each other, so we're able to just yell ideas, and I'll be like, wait a minute, what's going on with Fugitoid right now? What's going on with Old Hob? Where's Slash at this scene? And he can go, he's right here. Or I can ask, even in scripts I haven't seen yet, but he's writing. I can be like, wait a minute, is April going to be with Casey in this scene in 27? And he goes, yeah, he will be. So okay, great. Now I can plan this other stuff. So that's very handy, and not have to worry about waiting on an email or a phone call back and forth. So it's handy to
Is
have them right there.
Tom the only one who's working on the Turtle comic with you that is right here at IDW?
Well, there's Sean Lee, who does almost all of the production work, who's in the back there. So that's handy to have someone who's familiar with the different fonts and the different captions, who's been there from the start. But yeah, it's us, yeah. And then there's the reprint department, Justin and Alonzo, who are responsible for all the collected editions.
You guys got a lot of great things coming out with everything, and you guys keep bringing in, as we brought up a few times, different artists. The question here is something I'm sure a lot of artists is curious about, is how do you choose your artists who are going to be working on these comics?
That's a good question. It's a combination. I'm always kind of on the lookout in different sources for new artists, because I enjoy that part of the job, finding new artists. So I'm looking at books that I enjoy reading on stands. I try and collect as much of the competition's work as possible, just because I enjoy reading it. And there's a lot of good comics coming out from all publishers right now. So I'll kind of keep an eye out, see who's doing good work. I'll check out things like DeviantArt and do search for Ninja Turtles, and then some of it's people contacting us. Maybe they'll know Chris Ryle, the editor-in-chief, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm a huge Turtles fan," and he'll send them to me. There's been a couple instances of that, of people coming directly to us and being, "Hey, I'm a huge Turtle fan," and sometimes it doesn't work out, sometimes it does. Cover artists kind of pop in my head right now, or Freddie Williams, who did the 24 cover, incentive cover. He's a huge Turtles fan, and he does a lot of DC work, and he's busy, but he's just, if you got any place for me, I'd love to do a cover. Rob Guillory, who did, I think, maybe the number 5 incentive cover. I was a big fan of Chew, but he was a big Turtles fan. And so it's a combination of me reaching out to people and people reaching out to us. So it's a pretty healthy balance between those two.
And there's a lot of fantastic artists out there.
Yeah. And not everyone can do Turtles. It's surprising how Turtles can be kind of tricky, You see a lot of great Turtles art, and you see, oh, they're easy to draw, but then you see something that's not so great. It takes a certain sort of mindset to do a good Turtle.
Styles are always changing on the Turtles, so when you think you get a style down,
Yeah.
all of a sudden they have more oval heads, or their shells have a different design.
Yeah, and that's something I worry about too, is consistency, because I think it's important to have a degree of consistency in an ongoing book. But at the same time, I feel like the artists have worked for their particular story arcs, and that's a weakness of mine. I just love different art styles, and so part of me is always like, we need to keep this more consistent, more homogenized style, and then part of me is like, forget it, let's just go for it. And there's a precedent for that in Turtles, that in the Mirage, that there was so many different art styles. So I always fall back on that whenever that part of my brain says, like, we need to keep it more consistent. I say, no, it's okay. We can fuss around a little more.
Thankfully, Ninja Turtles is not one of those areas where they have like the measurements on the lines of how thick this arm needs to be or anything like that.
Yeah.
You got this leeway.
You can have some fun. Wait till you see Ross's stuff in the next story arc, because he's itching to add his own personal flourishes and touches. So it's gonna be fun.
You've already got the main story very heavy as the main story everyone's following, but now we got the new Nickelodeon one.
Yeah.
You got brought in right away as the editor, or was that a discussion?
No, it's. I think it's pretty. I've marked my territory with Turtles, so I was going to be the one who's going to be watching the series anyway, regardless of whether I was working on the book. So it just, and I've got a relationship with the people at Nickelodeon, and we're going to be the same people who are dealing with approvals and that stuff. So it made a lot of sense for me to work on that book too. One
of the things I'm really excited about is that Kenny wrote episodes of the Nickelodeon series, and now he's here. How did that come about on IDW's side with getting Kenny here?
Kenny contacted us, I believe. And he contacted me. I don't remember exactly how he got our email or anything like that, but he definitely reached out to me. And it's always tricky because you never, you don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to say, well, we're doing our own thing. I don't know if it's gonna work out, but I was immediately taken that Kenny seems really intelligent and has a lot of enthusiasm for the Turtles. So he did the #1 script, and that worked out really well. It's one of those things where it's just like, you know what you're doing, you hit deadlines, you're really good, and plus he was able to, help on my end actually be like, in the writer's room we discussed this motivation for Fish Face, so it'd be nice to come back to that in this issue, and that's not stuff I'm privy to. I don't know what they're doing in the Nickelodeon writer's room, so that's really handy, and I really envisioned it to be the new animated adventures to be rotating talent akin to the micro series, and you're going to see more different talent, different writers coming up, but Kenny has sort of established himself as the go-to guy, because he knows that material better than anyone. There's no learning curve, and he's just building on strength and strength. So he's really awesome.
When Archie's had the Turtles, they went off in their own direction from the cartoon, giving it a very in-depth storyline with its own characters. Are you guys thinking about doing something similar with the Nickelodeon series?
It's still early days, so we're gonna have to see how long the series lasts. I think it's sort of inevitable if the series continues. I know right now we're talking about, for the end of the first year, issues 11 and 12, we're talking about a two-parter, which is going to be the first two-parter that we'll have. And so I can see things going on. I'd like to try and stay. There's no way to stay completely in continuity with the show just because we're on different production schedules, and I get a first look at the scripts before they're aired, but it's still, it can't. There's no way it's going to be able to match up perfectly. I'm sure we're going to have continuity things that diverge, just because that's the nature of the beast. But I'd like to do everything I can to keep it in the realm of the show and make it seem like missing episodes. Just because I think, for me, I love the show, and I think there's so much potential to different characters to explore and nooks and crannies to develop. So I'd like to for at least this first year. That's all I can really envision, because if I go beyond that, I'll go bonkers. For the first year, that's we're gonna try and stay as in continuity as we can.
Are you working with Zero then, if you're getting into the scripts and stuff, and talking things out with him too?
Zero's super busy. He's done one cover for us. He's doing another cover for us. Hopefully we'll do more. He seems to have a lot of fun doing it. So I talked to him a little bit, but not that in depth. I'm not part of the writing process in that show at all, so I'm not privy to that. But Nickelodeon itself will send me sort of season guides. Like I've got a season guide for season 2, so I know some cool things that are happening. Those are very broad strokes. And then as we get closer to the season approaching, I'll start getting the locked shooting scripts. It always takes me a while to go, because then they come in batches of 6. It takes me a while to read those on top of everything else I'm reading. So I'll gradually, there's sort of a drip of information so that I get, and some things change right up until the end. So there's some things that, a lot of it's brand new to me when I see it on Saturday mornings, just like everyone else.
With the Nickelodeon series and ongoing series, right, as two of your big projects, I know you're also working on My Little Pony. How many comics are you currently on yourself right now?
Like editing per month?
Yeah.
It changes from bit to bit, but usually it's between 6 to 8. Usually average about 7 books.
So what is a normal day like for you here at the publishing studio?
It depends. Every day's a little different. There's usually 2 weeks of the month are really focused on, for whatever reason, most of my books come out, are going to print on 2 weeks of the month. Maybe 1 or 2 will be on a 3rd week. So I have kind of half a month that's sort of dedicated to, okay, this needs to go to production right now. It's copy editing. It's making sure all the files are getting in. Scolding artists who are late. And then the other 2 weeks are sort of more focused on working on stories, working on script ideas, talking to writers about proposals, and working with artists on covers. And there's a million other things. There's ballooning the pages, making sure that where the balloons, the dialogue balloons go. There's writing solicitation text. There's just an endless amount of things to do. There's working on exclusive covers, talking to licensors, making sure they're happy, and making sure that the general directions of the books are going well. But sort of the biggest things that take up time are developing stories, reading scripts, talking to writers, developing, especially on things that are story intensive, like Turtles, and to a degree, My Little Pony, and then actually just getting the book out and proofreading it, looking at the printer proofs. So yeah, it's essentially it's the same job as a producer in a film. It's a project manager. It's making sure that all the pieces are moving. It's setting schedules. It's right now we're working on solicitations for January. And I'm like, it's still summer. I don't want to think about 2014 yet. But so you always have to have one part of your brain thinking 6 months ahead, and one part of your brain thinking about this week and the books that are due to print this week. So keeping all that straight, and every book has a team of about 4 to 5 to 6 different people, and so making sure they're all on the same wavelength, and the colorist is getting the files when they need to, and that those colors are coming back to us, to our production department, so they can put the book together and letter it. Just making sure everything keeps moving, because what's interesting about comics is it just doesn't stop. It just keeps going. So
now you got the ongoing with Turtles, you have the micros, and you have the Nickelodeon ones, so that's 3 comics a month where you gotta stay right on top of it, and that's not including the other ones you just mentioned. So it's a lot of work, and we appreciate every bit of it.
Yeah, it's really, it can be stressful, but it's also really fun and really rewarding. It's great to see a book at the end of the day and be able to flip through it and see it on the shelves. It's a lot of fun. And hear feedback from fans. It's great.
I haven't seen anyone upset yet. I've seen people confused when I tried to explain it to people. But
there's some upset people out there. There's some people who think we should be doing, going to either extreme, either having it more cartoony and kid friendly, or to have it much darker and violent. And I can see both aspects of those arguments. I would try and tread a middle ground, not because we need to, but because we want to. I think that's just kind of naturally where the story takes us, is in that middle ground. But yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people who, it's not perfect for them, and that's fine. That's as it should be. The book's not exactly how I'd like it to be. There's always, things you'd like to change. But overall, everyone's been so supportive, and that's.
Is there any projects that has not been able to work into the storyline yet that you would like to, without giving any type of spoilers, but something that you've been hoping to do?
Well, I don't think it's a surprise to say that there's a couple huge, Turtles characters that we haven't got to yet. Rat King, Leatherhead, that I'd like to, and I'm not going to say when, but they're on the radar. I feel like we've introduced so many characters, and I worry about it being overload as is, especially in City Fall, where we're introducing Hun, Bebop and Rocksteady. I don't want it to become overwhelming, because I also want to continue these character stories. You look at someone like Old Hob, and he could have been dead. We could have just left him dead, and that's it, and that's one character off the plate, but there was more potential in him.
So glad you did it.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just been so much fun, and there's going to be, we're going to see some deaths eventually. We've got some deaths planned, and I hope will be permanent. And with Ooze and Shredder's Resurrection, there's always the opportunity to bring character back, like we did with Hob. But I like it hopefully when we make it clear a character's dead, I like them to stay dead. But the flip side of that, the reason you're not going to see a lot of death is because I think there's a lot of potential in these characters and more stories to be told. And so I think to have a death for death's sake, for it to be shocking, well, okay, that's fine. Maybe we could have killed Casey, in issue 22. And I actually heard some retailers say, you should have killed him. That would have made it, boosted sales so much. It would have been a, a milestone event. And that's sort of a cynical way to say it. I mean, there's Casey's stories. If you read 25, you get a hint at someone who's important to Casey going into, and that story's going to develop in major ways. So, there's a lot of story to be told with all these characters.
With all these stories, all these changes, do you have any favorite change that you have done so far with the Turtles?
What I've liked, what I'm excited about right now is what we're doing with Donatello, sort of a little bit in Northampton. He's very much been the cynic, the scientist. But we're going to start seeing a burgeoning spiritual side to him, because he's someone who explores all options, and he's been hit with some strong evidence that supports there's more than just science, and so he's going to start exploring sort of a more spiritual path, and I'm excited to do that because I think Donatello's always had a spiritual center to him in all incarnations, and that's something we haven't really got into. So I'm excited to see how his character develops, because I feel like he's been a little bit in the background. I mean, he had an important role in Krang War, and will continue to he'll have an important role in City Fall. But it's safe to say that the focus is more on Leonardo right now, and to a degree Raphael, and I like to explore a little bit more of Donatello and Michelangelo. In terms of things that we've done specifically, I'd have to go back to the reincarnation angle and secret history of the Foot Clan. That being able to tell the story of the Foot Clan, the history of the Foot Clan, and get into Shredder's origin in a meaty, hopefully interesting way. That's been really exciting to me, because that's an area that, for whatever reason, hasn't been that explored that much in the past, which is interesting, because it seems like a no-brainer to me. It's just such a rich area to explore. I guess we were able, since the reincarnation angle and the feudal Japan stuff, we introduced a new layer that allows you to dig deeper into it. But that series was a lot of fun to work on. And I like that Krang is still a total bastard and yes. Such a clear villain, but that there's something to him. That he has a noble purpose. He wants to save his race. And I think there's a degree of all our villains where we try and find their humanity. Even someone like Baxter, who I think is probably just our most clearly just like villain. There isn't much good to him, but you love to hate him because he's such, everyone's got that side of themselves where they think, I'm better than these people, I'm smarter than these people, everyone else is a dummy and I know what's going on. And that's something very human to explore. And we're talking, City Fall has been largely, we haven't been touching on Krang and Burno Island and Baxter, and we're talking right now about what's going to happen with them after that. It's a lot of fun. We've got a lot of Fugitoid is involved. So it's really fun to get back into those characters.
Is there any projects coming up within the next year that you can mention for our viewers?
No, because they're just not approved yet. But there's a lot coming in 2014. There's we were talking before, I mentioned that there's going to be a little mini crossover, sort of. I can't say anything, but you're going to see a little mini crossover with another property, which should be fun. But we've got some potentially huge plans for 2014 that are going to be bigger than anything that we've done so far. It's not being ignored that it's the 30th anniversary next May. Yes. No plans are set yet, so that's a double reason. Even if they were set, I couldn't talk about them, but since they're not set, I can't even begin to talk about them because they could fall apart. But I hope they don't, and I'm really excited for them, and I think it allows a whole new world of potential for Turtles. So I hope we can talk again this next year, and we can say, remember that stuff I was talking about? So we'll see. I wish I had some spoilers I could give you, but I can't really rate. But I will say, you were just talking about Shredder. Check out that Shredder micro, because I think we have given depth to Shredder. But I think an argument can still be made that, oh, he's just accumulating power for power's sake. We learned something about him in the Shredder Micro that I think fleshes him out a good deal, and I'm excited for that.
That is...
Yeah, it's a nice, sort of how the Krang Micro, the first Micro, was an epilogue to Krang War and kind of give a good, okay, that's why, give more depth into why he's doing this. Shredder Micro is very much an epilogue to City Fall, so I'm excited for people to see that. And Bebop and Rocksteady, which we're starting to get the colors in for right now. That issue is so much fun. It's really exciting. It's
really hinted at in this most recent issue.
Yes, end of 25, yeah.
I know you probably can't say yes or no, but I have to ask for fans' sakes. Is there any discussion even about a movie adaptation?
Yeah, there's been a discussion. It's difficult because I think everyone knows that it's an origin story. It's a start of a story. So normally one does sort of prequels or you could do a straight adaptation. They're really hard to pull off because it means not only dealing with the normal licensor, it means also dealing with the studio, and sometimes you can't get likeness rights, and sometimes you can't show things that are going to be revealed in the movie. So they're really difficult. We're talking about it. I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen or it didn't happen. I can see it going either way right now. It's funny, Tom and I took a road trip up to LA where we actually plotted out all of Northampton arc on that car trip. It was a lot of fun, but we read the script. So we know what it's about, but I can't say whether we're going to do anything with it. I wouldn't be surprised if we did or didn't. It's a little bit too early.
Is there anything you would like to say to the fans who have been reading the comics and watching your work?
Again, thank you so much, and there are some huge surprises coming up. If you think you've seen some surprises so far, you haven't seen nothing yet, so stay tuned.
Thank you everyone for watching, and we will catch you next time on Cowabunga Corner. Cut!